The sand is warm with blood. The crowd is silent. One breath, then a blade. Before cameras, before directors' history staged its own games. Not for glory, not for fame, only survival. And you didn't get to choose whether to play. Squid Game may be fiction, but history has seen far more brutal games with no cameras, no scripts, and no way out. In ancient times, being chosen didn't mean you were lucky. It meant you were trapped. Some were thrown into arenas. Others were buried in rules they didn't understand. But all were forced to play. Today, we whisper through time to the places where death was spectacle, where the lines between punishment, religion, and entertainment vanished, where human lives were chips in a game played by kings, gods, and generals. These aren't fantasies. These are history's deadliest games. The Colosseum, Rome's brutal masterpiece, a place where slaves, criminals, and prisoners became pawns. Gladiators were trained to kill, but some were farmers, teachers forced into the arena by fate. Each fight wasn't just a battle, it was a message. To the people, this is power. To the enemies, this is what happens. Some games paired men with lions, others pitted friends against each other, all under cheers and the emperor's thumb. Spartacus was one such pawn, a Thracian gladiator forced into the arena. But he didn't just fight lions. He fought back. He led a rebellion of over 70,000 slaves. For a moment, they flipped the game board. But Rome never forgives escape. They hunted them down, one by one, until Spartacus, the man who defied the rules, vanished into history. Some say he died sword in hand. Others believe he disappeared into myth. In the temples of the Aztec Empire, death was divine. Captured warriors weren't just prisoners, they were offerings. Their battles weren't for freedom, they were rituals. A warrior could be forced into ceremonial combat alone, armed with a wooden blade, facing 5 fully armed enemies. They called it gladiatorial sacrifice. If he fought bravely, the gods might smile. But no matter how hard he fought, he would not leave alive. The Flower Wars fought not to win, but to capture. Aztec armies clashed with rivals, not for land, but for humans to fuel the blood-hungry gods. Teenage boys were trained as living chess pieces. To lose meant being marched to a temple, your heart carved out before the sun. And all of it was ritual, an endless cycle of sacrifice and spectacle. Not a war, a system. The Vikings didn't just raid, they ritualized vengeance. The blood eagle wasn't just punishment. It was performance. A victim's back sliced open, ribs pulled outward, lungs stretched like wings. Was it real? Some say yes. Some call it myth. But in a world where saga met steel, belief alone was powerful. And in the Norse mind, death wasn't defeat. It was an audition for Valhalla. In feudal Japan, honor was sharper than any blade. When a samurai failed, there was only one way to reclaim dignity: seppuku. Kneel, write your final poem. Then, slice open your stomach. No escape. Just a final performance of control, loyalty, and silence. Even in death, the samurai played by the rules. A game where the only victory was how beautifully you died. The French Revolution brought justice to the streets. But justice wore a cruel face. Crowds gathered to watch the guillotine work. Execution became theater. Vendors sold snacks. Artists sketched the dying. Some prisoners bowed. Others smiled. It wasn't just death, it was participation. Even in their final seconds, they were part of a game they never joined willingly. In World War II, the games turned darker. The Nazis didn't just kill, they played. In concentration camps, prisoners were told to race the winner might live. Doctors like Mengele flipped coins on human life. Twins were studied, families split, hope dangled, then ripped away. This wasn't strategy. It was sadism as science. A cruel simulation that didn't need a camera to be unwatchable. In the Cold War, the battlefield turned inward. Governments wanted mind control, obedience, endurance. Enter Project MK Ultra. Volunteers, often unwitting, were drugged, isolated, tested, told nothing, watched always. Some broke, some vanished. The goal? Build the perfect agent. Or maybe just to see how far a mind can bend before it breaks. These weren't contestants. They were lab rats in invisible games. In the royal courts of India, Chaturanga, ancient chess, wasn't just a game of thought. Some kings turned it real. Courtyards became life-sized boards. Servants, prisoners, even war captives stood in for pieces. When a knight struck a pawn, the losing piece was whipped, sometimes executed. It was intellect, laced with cruelty. Because when kings play, pawns bleed, and no one questions the rules of a king. In Byzantium, bloodline meant everything, and power was a game played in silk-gloved violence. Heirs born in the purple chamber were considered divine. But not all contenders were wanted. Brothers blinded, cousins strangled with golden cords. One boy had his nose cut off, unfit to rule, they said. Still, he returned with a silver prosthetic and claimed the throne. Even mutilation wasn't enough to escape the game of emperors. Knights weren't always noble. In medieval tournaments, some events were closer to war than sport. Steel weapons, no real rules. Winning meant land, gold, sometimes marriage. But injuries were expected. And deaths? Just part of the entertainment. Some nobles wagered entire estates. Others treated it as legalized murder. The pageantry hid the truth. It was combat wrapped in song. The Mongols didn't just fight hard, they played smart. One cruel tactic: release prisoners and hunt them. A sport, a lesson, a warning. Those caught were sometimes given a choice: fight in the next raid or be used again. As bait, Genghis Khan knew fear wasn't just a weapon. It was a game board, and he always played to win. Legend says Russian roulette began among bored soldiers. An empty revolver, one bullet, spin, click, a game against fate. But later, it mutated into coerced torture. Prisoners forced to play. Hostages told to choose. Even in modern war zones, this cruel gamble appears. Proof that the most terrifying games are the ones with choice. Because that's when fear truly blooms. During some Chinese dynasties, public execution wasn't just law. It was ritual. Thousands watched beheadings. But worse was the Lingqi death by 1,000 cuts. A slow, deliberate slicing of flesh. Each wound planned. Each scream part of the ceremony. For some, family members were forced to watch. Or worse, participate. Pain wasn't the punishment. It was the performance. In King Leopold's Congo, rubber quotas were law. Fail and pay in flesh. children's hands severed, villages burned. It was a hidden genocide, masked as economics. But some captains made it a sport, wagering on who could extract the most with the least bullets. 1 bullet per hand. No hand? Explain yourself. A business model turned blood game. In WW2, Japan's Unit 731 ran experiments. Frostbite studies on live humans. Vivisection without anesthesia. People used as targets to test grenades. It wasn't medicine. It was methodical cruelty dressed in white coats. Victims were called logs because dehumanization made the game easier, and silence made it possible. Defectors whisper of North Korean labor camps, where prisoners are made to race for food scraps, punished for arresting, shot for stealing. Some are told to choose between their own child or spouse during interrogations. Each choice is recorded, not to find truth, but to watch them break. The rules? Arbitrary. The pain? Precision made. 1961. Yale University. A man is told to shock a stranger for every wrong answer. Screams echo through the wall. He hesitates. The scientist insists, "You must continue." He does. This was the Milgram experiment. Obedience studied like warfare. 65% of people went all the way, even as the screams stopped, because authority rewrites morality. No arena, no weapons, just a desk, a lab coat, and a man willing to follow. Modern television gave us survival shows, but sometimes the line blurs. In Russia's Game 2 Winter, contestants were told crimes were allowed, even rape or murder. It was later debunked, or so they say. But in the age of clicks and virality, what happens when fictional brutality becomes real for views? We've made entertainment out of suffering. Again. Only now, we broadcast it in HD. In Aztec temples, losing a game didn't mean humiliation. It meant sacrifice. The Mesoamerican ball game Alamalistli pitted teams in ritual sport. Rubber ball, stone rings, no hands. But the stakes? Cosmic. Some scholars say the winners were sacrificed in honor. Others say the losers fed the gods. Either way, the sun demanded blood, and the scoreboard was carved in stone. During the Korean War, prisoners were used as decoys, forced to walk ahead of troops, triggering mines. Some were tied to tanks, their lives a buffer. No weapon, no defense, just terrified silence. War became a chessboard of flesh, where pawns were living men and kings never bled. We know the gladiators, but hidden in whispers were the gladiatrices, female fighters. Rare, exotic, pitted against beasts and each other. Noblewomen came to watch, not out of thrill but to study pain, to measure humiliation. For a woman who defied norms in Rome, the arena was both punishment and prophecy. In the Nazi camps, guards created games. Tell a child, race to their mother, then shoot both. Toss a coin to decide a prisoner's fate. Force a man to dig his own grave, then refill it. Over and over, until his mind broke. Cruelty was recreation. Laughter echoed from the towers, because monsters sometimes wear uniforms. In 18th century Europe, a slight word could mean death. Duels weren't sport. They were ritual violence. 2 men, 1 insult. Pistols at dawn. Seconds watched. Doctors waited. Some dueled over letters, others for love. And though outlawed, honor made them sacred, because reputation was worth the risk. 1816. The French frigate Méduse sinks. 147 men. One raft. No food, no rescue. Soon, a choice. Eat the dead or join them. They drew straws, fought, killed. By day 13, only 15 survived. And what they endured was no accident. It was hierarchy, hubris, and human desperation. A real-life survival game, adrift on black water. Under Pol Pot, intellectuals were enemies. If you wore glasses, death. Spoke French? Death. In S21 prison, guards played with lives. Confess or we kill your family. Some invented crimes to end the pain. Others held on and died slower. It wasn't torture. It was psychological roulette, with no winning move. In Stalin's gulags, games were whispers. Who will die first? Who has food hidden? Inmates gambled with trust, traded names for rations. A wrong friend meant death. A right one, only slightly less pain. Snow buried escape attempts. But worse was the silence, because isolation turns the mind into its own arena, and memory into torture. In war zones like Sierra Leone, children became weapons, forced to kill or be killed, drugged, blindfolded, sometimes made to shoot their own family. The younger, the better, more obedient. No past, no mercy. Each boy became a contestant in a game of survival, and their prize was making it to tomorrow. In the 1980s, a Japanese show contestant was trapped in a room. No clothes, no contact. He had to win his freedom through magazine contests. He lost 20 kilograms, broke mentally. All of it aired live, for laughs. They called it entertainment. But what the world saw was a man unraveling, on camera, alone. In 1994, genocide didn't start with guns. It started with radio. Hutu broadcasters told stories, named names, laughed. Do your duty, they said. Neighbors turned killers. Machetes over fences. Whispers turned into screams. And Rwanda became a country where genocide was a group activity. No arena. Just gardens soaked in blood. Online forums. Late-night chat rooms. Strangers agree to die together. Internet suicide pacts quiet, clinical, real. They meet at train stations or rented cabins. It's not about pain. It's about not doing it alone. The only rule? Don't back out. Modern connection, twisted into modern death. In times of rebellion, Persian kings chose 10 prisoners. One would be spared, chosen by dice. The others executed. It wasn't mercy. It was psychological chaos. Even among the doomed, they forced hope, because sometimes the cruelest torture is chance, drugs, isolation, hypnosis. The CIA wanted mind control, so they played with lives. Unwilling participants, hospital patients, even citizens. They erased memories, implanted triggers. Some subjects vanished, others lost themselves. And the worst part? They called it research. Before the fall of Angkor, warriors fought in staged jungle duels. Not for glory, but for selection. Young men were tested through orchestrated combat. No armor, only instinct. The winners guarded the king. The losers vanished. Legend says the trees grew tall on their blood, roots thick with memory. One day a year, slaves and masters switched roles. Slaves feasted, mocked, even crowned a lord of misrule. But the joke had edges. Some lords were later sacrificed. Their power, ceremonial. Their death, real. A carnival of chaos, where smiles masked terror and games ended in blood. In London's shadows, orphan boys were made to fight. Street gamblers bet coins, broken noses, black eyes. The strongest got soup. The weakest didn't return. There were no guardians, only gangs, and fists became language. Because childhood, in that world, was a spectator sport. In one Soviet prison, a grandmaster was held. Guards made him play daily. Lose, he starved. Win, they beat him. Every game was a trap. Every move, agony. He whispered once, "It's not chess, it's a mirror of madness." Checkmate had no meaning in hell. In ancient rituals, criminals ran obstacle races. Spiked pits, fires. Spectators cheered. If they survived, they won temporary reprieve. But most didn't. Their blood-soaked imperial sands. A message. Escape was possible, but unlikely. And mercy, performative. Today in Louisiana, inmates ride bulls. The crowd watches. Guards cheer. Broken ribs earn applause. But it's voluntary. They say it's for redemption. But look closer. It's the same ancient script. A game of pain and survival, sold as entertainment. During secret training, Soviet soldiers skied with rifles in real combat zones. Targets weren't always cardboard. They were moving, breathing, sometimes political prisoners. A test of endurance and obedience. If you hesitated, you became the next target. Winter made no sound, except for the shots. In one prison, when tensions rose, guards picked one man at random, executed him. No trial, no reason, just a reminder. They could. The game wasn't survival. It was submission, and chance was the only god. In some European festivals, knights fought blindfolded. Crowds watched them stumble, swing, collide. The game was holy, they said. Divine will would guide the victor. But really, it was spectacle. Steel and blood and faith twisted into farce. A theater of injury for bored nobles. In ancient Siam, condemned men faced starved tigers. The crowd gathered. One weapon, a dull spear. Sometimes the man won. Sometimes the beast did. But the rules were clear. You live if the tiger dies. And the jungle gods watched. Rumors whisper of detainees forced into fights. Bare hands. No language shared. Just violence. Guards watched through glass. Some bet on winners. Others filmed. No documents exist. But scars remain. Because when law disappears, only the game remains. At age 7, Spartan boys entered the Agoge. Fought, starved, endured whippings as sport. In one rite, they stole cheese from an altar. Guards beat them with rods. Some died. But weakness was death anyway, because in Sparta, childhood was the first battlefield. In Japan's Unit 731, they built soundproof rooms to test how long a scream lasts. Vivisection without anesthesia. Frostbite experiments. Diseases injected for data. Prisoners were numbers, and their pain silent, because sound couldn't escape, and neither could they. In 1948, Shirley Jackson wrote The Lottery. Fiction? Yes, but inspired by real village punishments, social ostracism, mob justice. Stone by stone, we like to think we're civilized, but in groups, morality fades, and rituals replace reason. A fire game. Children swing flaming cans to cleanse fields, yes, but also to ward off spirits. Sometimes accidents, burns, and yet they smile because ritual pain feels sacred. The line between danger and tradition, thin as smoke. Haitian gangs play roulette with rivals. One bullet, 6 chambers. Click, click, bang. It's theater, but also message. Life is luck. Obey or vanish. And the audience? Their own people, trapped in silence. In the war, tunnel rats were sent underground. Alone. Flashlight, pistol, traps, snakes, enemies in the dark. One step wrong, gone. Each mission was a gamble, each breath a countdown, and the tunnels whispered back. Early space training wasn't glorious. Strapped to spinning chairs until blackout. Isolation tanks. Sleep deprivation. Some candidates broke, but only perfect minds went up. The rest? Discarded. The stars demanded sacrifice. Long before launch. Not fiction, real people poisoned, buried, then dug up, drugged, enslaved, believed they were dead, believed they had to obey. The game wasn't physical. It was mental domination. And belief was the leash. The long march, thousands of kilometers. No food, no rest. If you collapsed, you were left. Some were dragged, others beaten forward. Not a journey, a test, and many failed it. Sometimes condemned men weren't just killed. They reenacted myths. Act as Icarus, burned alive. Act as Hercules, crushed. The crowd roared, because when death becomes theater, everyone plays a role. Dissidents vanish. Not killed, hunted. Their families watched. Phones tapped. Turn yourself in, or they'll suffer. Every moment became a game. Every silence, strategy. But there were no winners. Only ghosts. Generations trapped in their homes. Because if you step outside, you die. Kanun law. Honor killings. A man kills a man. Then his son. Then his cousin. The game is endless. And the rules? Sacred. Modern reality television pushes edges. Eat raw animals. Stay in darkness. Sleep deprived. For prize money. For fame. But where's the line? When do we stop watching and start participating? Squid Game may be fiction, but history wrote it first. No cameras, no scripts, just blood, belief, and silence. From empires to alleys, we made death a game, again and again, and the whispers never stopped. They echo still, in prisons, in shows, in our gaze. So the next time you're entertained, ask yourself, are you watching a game or playing one? Thanks for listening. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Whisper it forward. Buzz Whispers continues in shadows and truths. And if you want to keep walking these hidden paths with us, tap subscribe, hit like, and pass it on. Because some echoes are meant to be heard. See you in the next episode.